They can make criminals heroes.
Now, just to be very clear, when he says they're making criminals heroes, he is somehow not talking about George Floyd. Well, it's that time of year again. Students are graduating from universities all over the country after several years of hard work, or very little work in many cases. They're getting their diplomas and heading out into the real world. And you know what that means? It's time to see whether the University of California, Berkeley remains the undisputed champion in the very competitive category of most degrading, unwatchable, and humiliating commencement ceremony on the planet. Now, as you might remember, a couple of years ago, Berkeley took the crown by unanimous decision after this moment went viral, depicting the scene at their black-only commencement ceremony. Yes, in defiance of civil rights laws and basic standards of ethics, as well as common sense, Berkeley kicked all the white people and Asians out and held a segregated graduation for the black students only. And here's a brief snippet of what that looked like.
Aramis Anderson said, "The last shall be first and the first shall be last." Receiving a Bachelor of Arts in Disciplinary Studies field, Political Economy, Legal Studies, and African American Studies. He said, "Disbursement and allocation, reparations for African Americans."
So if you're listening to the audio podcast, the graduates are doing a lot of jumping around and crawling around on the stage. Onlookers are quite thrilled by it. Very proud of, what was that, bachelor's in political economy? Just minutes and minutes of work required to obtain a degree of that kind. So that's what's going on there. But what you cannot do under any circumstances is deny that Berkeley accomplished something really special here. They set the standard. You know, every other school in the country really needed to up their game after this if they wanted to undermine the credibility and integrity of their own commencement ceremonies, and by extension, the credibility and integrity of the degrees that they were awarding. So let's see. How have other schools been doing since this incident? What have they learned from Berkeley after taking some time in the off-season to train hard and become woke grandmasters? How exactly are they going to dethrone Berkeley as the international champion of unwatchable graduation ceremonies? Well, the other day, a listener sent me a tip about the commencement that just took place a few days ago at the University of California School of Law, which was previously known as the University of California Hastings School of Law until around 2 years ago. But then they changed their name, sort of like the Redskins, and for similar reasons, as you'll see in a second. Admittedly, it's a 2-hour ceremony. I didn't have time or anywhere near the interest to watch the whole thing, but it didn't take long for Hastings to formally enter the competition for Berkeley's throne and make the very strong showing of their own. So behold the first minutes of the University of California Law School's commencement. Here it is.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Albert Sinker, and I serve as chair of the board of directors at UC Law. Before we begin our program, it is now our tradition to do so at the start of every commencement. We acknowledge today that 2 decades before the founding of the school, Serenus Hastings was involved in the establishment of a militia and other acts that resulted in the brutal slayings of the people who lived in the renowned and East Valley areas of California. Currently, UC Law is engaged in restorative justice initiatives that will provide educational opportunities for their youth. While we cannot erase our past, we can make sure that the past does not continue to impact the future of the Yuki and other indigenous people of the Eden and Round Valley areas.
So just to be very clear about this, this is the first minute. I mean, the first thing he says at this commencement ceremony for graduates is a lengthy apology for the old name of their school. He's really, really sorry that the school in the past used to be named for a prominent lawyer and politician named Serenus Hastings. And apparently Hastings mistreated something called the Yuki people, and therefore the school is going to engage in restorative justice. And he gets a lot of applause for this, as you just saw. Now let's just assume for a second that the narrative surrounding Serenus Hastings is true and that he was an awful person who mistreated the Yukis, whoever, whatever they are, even given that assumption, this commencement speaker still has to answer the following question. If the University of California School of Law really wants to pay penance to the Yuki people, and if they're really on stolen land or whatever, then, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, why don't they give the descendants of the Yuki people the deed to every building in the campus and every school in the University of California system? They could do that immediately if they wanted to. They could hand over every cent of the University of California's $30 billion endowment. But they're not doing that because they don't actually believe anything they're saying. They'd rather taunt the poor Yuki people, God rest their souls. Now, of course, all of this slander about Serenus Hastings was invented circa 2017 by left-wing professors looking to demonize a white guy because, of course, it was fashionable to do so at the time. In 2023, the California Supreme Court's Historical Society Review published a thorough review of Serenus Hastings' life. And this review found that, quote, there's no assertion and no evidence that he killed or knew in advance of any plan to kill Indians. In fact, he testified under oath in the legislature's 1860 investigation into the Mendocino Indian Wars that he had no knowledge of any Indian killings before they occurred. Rather, the claim by critics is that by petitioning the governor to commission a local militia that came to be known as the Eel River Rangers, Hastings was effectively in control of the Rangers, close quote. So in other words, the administration of this law school concocted a way to smear their school's namesake, and it falls apart under any scrutiny whatsoever. They're saying that he asked for a militia to form, and therefore he's responsible for everything the militia did. That's the allegation. And yet, even though their claims are extremely flimsy and incoherent, they're still apologizing for the old name of their school anyway. So, and I guess they're going to do this at every graduation ceremony, for all time. So that's pretty embarrassing. And there were other humiliating moments from this commencement, too, from the students wearing gay pride flags to one speaker's defense of Abrego Garcia, the illegal immigrant gangster and wife beater. But the real question isn't whether this ceremony was embarrassing. The question is whether it's as embarrassing as Berkeley's from 2023, because, again, that's the standard. So let's bracket that whole ceremony for now and move on because there's a lot of competition. Here, for example, is a clip from Jennifer Coolidge's address at Emerson College's commencement and in Massachusetts a few weeks ago. Apparently, this woman is, oh yeah, I recognize her. She's from, what was that show again? White Lotus, yeah, isn't that her? Anyway, here she is. Let's watch.
I just want you to know that I'm excited that I'm speaking with, some very excited gay students. Hetero students.
Now, in case you couldn't make it out, she says, quote, I'm excited that I'm speaking with some very excited gay students and some less exciting hetero students. And that line went over really well, as you could tell. In particular, they can't get enough of this little speech on Reddit. In response to the clip, one of the most upvoted posts reads, quote, she nails comedy. Another post reads, I already started my day by dreading all the heteros I have to face, LMAO. And then there's this one, quote, people are gay/bi until they come out as straight. So it's all very dumb and embarrassing. But again, the question is, just how dumb and embarrassing is it, relatively speaking? You say what you will about the dancing students at the all-black Berkeley commencement ceremony, but they didn't inspire swarms of gay men on Reddit to sing their praises. That's another level of humiliation, one that only Emerson College has obtained thus far. Being a husband, father, and host of my own show means life never slows down. Imagine trying to eat 31 different fruits and vegetables every day. Sounds miserable and pretty time-consuming. But with Balance of Nature fruits and veggies, there's never been a more convenient dietary supplement to ensure you get a wide variety of fruits and vegetables every day with 31 different whole fruit and vegetable ingredients. Balance of Nature takes fruits and vegetables, freeze-dries them, turns them into a powder, and then puts them into a capsule. You take your fruit and veggie capsule every day, and then your body knows what to do with them. Go to balanceofnature.com, use promo code Walsh for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer. Plus, get a free bottle of Fiber and Spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Walsh. But again, it's a very crowded field, so let's continue. Here's the commencement address, also just from the last week or two, that 60 Minutes newsreader Scott Pelley just delivered at Wake Forest, one of the most deranged institutions in the country. This is the same university that defended a medical student who bragged about injuring a patient who mocked her preferred pronouns. And now they've got the 60 Minutes guy, supposedly a serious newsman, delivering a rambling, hyper-partisan speech at their graduation. Watch.
But in this moment, this morning, our sacred rule of law is under attack. Journalism is under attack. Universities are under attack. Freedom of speech is under attack. And insidious fear is reaching through our schools, our businesses, our homes, and into our private thoughts. The fear to speak in America. Power can rewrite history with grotesque, false narratives. They can make criminals heroes and heroes criminals. Power can change the definition of the words we use to describe reality. Diversity is now described as illegal. Equity is to be shunned. Inclusion is a dirty word. This is an old playbook, my friends. There's nothing new in this.
Now, just to be very clear, when he says they're making criminals heroes, he is somehow not talking about George Floyd. And when he says that people are afraid to speak in America, he's somehow not talking about the Christians who can't even have a concert without being attacked, physically assaulted by, Antifa militants. He's not talking about any of that. Now, there's one great quote in that word vomit, mainly because it makes no sense whatsoever in the context. He says, quote, "Power can change the definition of the words we use to describe reality." He really thinks that's a profound statement. It's supposed to be very chilling. And then to illustrate his point, he proceeds to say that the current administration thinks equity is dumb and that the DEI programs are illegal, whereas the previous administration embraced equity and DEI. That doesn't mean that the current administration is changing the definition of equity or DEI. Instead, the administration is just saying that these practices are unconstitutional and immoral. That's a pretty big point that Scott Pelley doesn't seem to grasp, even as he seems to think he's struck gold. He's really proud of himself here, waving his arms around. He thinks he's making a really profound point, even though he's making no sense whatsoever. But the real irony, of course, in this statement is that the entire point of the leftist project, going back more than a decade at this point, is exactly what Scott Pelley accuses the right of doing. The left's goal is to change the definition of words that we use to describe reality. I mean, no reasonable person could deny that. They're the ones who decided on a whim that the word woman means anyone who says they're a woman. They're the ones who decided that gender is a meaningless term that can describe a limitless number of fake identities, with new fake identities being added every day. They're the ones who have redefined marriage so that pretty much anything qualifies. These are the people who are changing the definition of words that we use to describe reality. But the CBS newsman is too dumb to realize that that's what he's really saying, so he doesn't realize that he's sort of making our point for us. In any event, we'll introduce one more contender just to try to cover our bases, even though it's probably a losing battle. As I go through these, it's becoming more and more evident that Berkeley is probably going to retain the throne, retain the crown. But here's a speaker at the commencement ceremony of Middlebury College in Vermont, and this was back in February. Watch how she describes her reaction to Trump's re-election. And the footage is sped up a little bit, but it's still, relatively comprehensible. And it's good that it's sped up because it's so stupid and unbearable that, you want to get through it as fast as you can. But here it is. Watch.
Ways that Middlebury fails its students make this sobering truth abundantly clear. This is heartbreaking. If there's anything you hear of what I'm saying, let it be this. When our hearts break, let them break open like pomegranates and burst with seeds that can take root. We are literally graduating the same month a fascist has taken office. Within 11 days, he has pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement for the second time, denied the existence of trans people, and unleashed a slew of ICE agents to arrest an average of 1,000 people every single day since they began. As global citizens, we cannot just focus on the violence of this campus or in the United States. We must extend our moral imagination to every life on this planet.
Let's go back to that money line again, because it's really quite beautiful. She says, quote, "If there's anything you hear in what I'm saying, let it be this. When our hearts break, let them break open like pomegranates and burst with seeds that can take root. We are literally graduating the same month a fascist is taking office. Within 11 days, he pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement for the second time." Close quote. Now, as far as metaphors go, you might say that it's, pretty bad. When our hearts break, let them break open like pomegranates. But then she manages to outdo herself. She says, as evidence of her claim that the president is a fascist like Adolf Hitler, that he, quote, pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. That's the new standard for fascism, according to the commencement speaker at Middlebury College in Vermont. It turns out that you don't need a totalitarian one-party state. You don't need state control over the media or an all-encompassing government-mandated ideology in every aspect of your life. Instead, all you need is to pull out of a non-binding international agreement to lower your carbon emissions. An agreement that no one, including the largest polluter on the planet, is taking seriously anyway. That's it. Oh, and you also have to deny the existence of trans people. That's what fascism is, apparently. But as humiliating as this speech is, the question remains, just how humiliating is it? How does it compare to Berkeley's all-black graduation, or the stark lack of self-awareness from the 60 Minutes anchor at Wake Forest, or the land acknowledgement at the University of California Hastings School of Law, or the sassy gay pride moment at Emerson? If I'm being honest, I'd have to say that Berkeley probably retains its crown. All these other schools are making a serious effort to degrade the credibility of their institutions, but their efforts simply lack the visual impact of Berkeley's ceremony from 2023. We're experiencing yet another off year in the woke Olympics, is what I'm saying. But as the good coaches say, there's always next year. And that is why the University of California Hastings School of Law and every other institution that hosted a woke commencement ceremony this year is today canceled. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.